Wait.
I guess he fell for it.
Here's looking at you, kid.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Academy's Visiting Artists Film Series, FilmAid edition for film composers. I'm Taura Stinson, and today I have the pleasure of interviewing the amazing Kris Bowers.
Hi, Taura. Good to see you.
Good to see you, Kris.
Yeah, thanks so much.
Oh, thank you. This is an amazing moment. I'm happy to. I have so many questions for you, but so does everyone else, so I have to get in line. I'm just gonna jump right in. I know that like a dream of mine growing up was to go to Juilliard, but you actually went there, and that's amazing. I know. I just want to know a little bit about that. You don't just wake up and decide to go to Juilliard. So this must have been a dream that was like brewing inside of you for years. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's interesting. I didn't actually decide that I wanted to go to Juilliard until I had gotten past the first round of auditions. My parents decided before I was born they wanted me to play piano, and they really did a lot to make sure that they put me in the best environments for music education, and they drove all over LA to find the best teachers and all this stuff. And I was, studying piano from the time I was 4 up until all through high school. And so I knew I wanted to go to a conservatory, but when I was a junior, I'd gotten a full scholarship to Berklee College of Music in Boston. And I told my parents, like, that's where I'm going. And there's no conversation about it, essentially. Right. And they were concerned that it didn't feel like the best structure in their mind as far as a school environment. And they wanted me to consider maybe going to USC or going to another school where I could major in music, but I could maybe minor in something else or get like a general education at the same time. And the idea of the conservatory was kind of making them nervous. And it was actually a teacher of mine and a mentor named Eric Reed, this amazing jazz pianist, who suggested to me and to my parents that I should look at Juilliard, and that it was a really great program. And it also would provide that structure that my parents were looking for. And so I did the first audition, and I was kind of like not really that interested, to be honest. And then I hadn't really looked at the program. And after I got through that first audition process, I just looked deeper into the program and realized that, oh, if I get in, I'm one of 4 jazz pianists in the program. And so the chances of me studying with Kenny Barron or Eric Reed or whomever I want to study with is much higher than if I go to Berklee and I'm one of like hundreds of pianists. And if I want to study with my favorite teacher, that might take me a few years to get there. So the idea of how small that environment was and how familiar it was, especially because they had a process where they only accepted what they lost the previous year. And so it was a really big mix of years and ages. So my freshman year, when I got there, the ensemble that I was in, it was like, me as a freshman and then a couple of seniors and a couple of master students. So it immediately puts you in this position where you have to operate on the same level as all these other players who are older than you or more experienced. And so once I understood the program a bit more, then that became like the only school I wanted to go to. And so I just really lucked out that in that second part of the audition process, I ended up getting in.
Oh, that is incredible. Way to go, mom and dad.
Yeah.
For that foresight. So you studied jazz there?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I want to know like about the transition, like from jazz to film scoring. Like, did you always want to score film, or did you want to be a big jazz artist, or what was your dream? And are you living your dream? There's like so many parts of this question.
Yeah, my parents, like I mentioned, as far as their plan for me, were very serious about me also having a plan for myself. Like they
Mm.
asked me when I was a freshman in high school, my dad was like, okay, well, what's the plan for college? Like, what do you think you want to do? And like, what's the trajectory essentially? And at that time, I had really fallen in love with film music just because my dad was a writer for film and TV. And so movies were just like,
Oh,
you know, something that we gathered around. You know, he always wanted to show us his favorite films. Anytime a new movie came out, we were immediately there at the theater to see that movie that weekend. And up until that point, piano had been this medium of expression for me. Like once I started learning jazz and improvisation, the thing that made me want to continue to play piano and make it my thing was the fact that it felt like a safe space for me to express emotion. And so once I recognized that there was a job where I literally could translate emotion into music, you know, realizing that I could listen to the score from Jurassic Park and feel the same level of adventure and excitement that I did when I was watching the movie. I just told my parents when my dad had that conversation with me when I was like 12, I was like, I want to go to college for jazz piano, and then I want to tour with my favorite jazz artist, and I want to tour with my own jazz band, and then transition into film scoring. And I honestly, like when I told him that plan, I was like, yeah, so maybe by the time I'm like 40, I'll be getting into film scoring essentially. And it was just a combination of the fact that like I I think the touring life was just, I mean, you know how it is. Like I just really, yeah, like the first few years I was like, I can't do this for like,
yeah,
15, 20 years.
yeah.
And also what was interesting is that some of my first projects came from people who heard me talk about that from that young age. Like I,
Mm.
I scored a documentary about Kobe Bryant. That was like one of my first projects. And that came because a friend of mine who I was in a high school all-star jazz band with came to me at a show here in LA with my band.
Mm.
And we hadn't seen each other since high school. And he was like, man, I remember when we were in that band in high school, you mentioned wanting to be a film composer, and I'm producing this documentary about Kobe, and I love your music, and I feel like you'd be great to compose for it. And
Wow.
so I feel like a lot of those first opportunities really just came because I talked about that plan so much that as soon as somebody thought, oh, I need a composer, they and recognized that I wanted to do that, they just kind of helped me with that transition essentially. One other funny thing, which is like a slight connection for us, is I know you obviously were nominated for Mudbound and
Mhm.
Reese. The first time that happened, where somebody was like, "Oh, you want to be a composer? Help me out," was Dee Reese's first short film, or a short film of hers when I was in high school. And
Oh,
I don't even know how I met her, but she asked me if I would score that film, and I was like, "Yeah, I want to." And I got home, and I was like, "I have no idea what to do." I put the VHS in my VHS player, and I was like, "What do I do now?"
wow.
Told her like, "I'm sorry, I can't score your film," and then she became Dee Reese, and I was like, "Oh man," but yeah,
Series. That's amazing. And
yeah,
you know what? We're gonna have to shorten that 6 degrees of separation and work together one of these days.
yeah, for
That's
sure.
that's amazing. Yeah, and that year I remember meeting Kobe and just like,
I saw her
you
that
know,
year. Yeah,
icon. How was it working with him?
man, yeah, it was amazing. I mean, he actually has had a huge impact on my mentality, my life, my approach to film scoring. So I worked with him on that documentary, but also one with that documentary. What was interesting is that when I was brought on, the director was like, we're pretty much done. We have a rough cut. We're going to show it to Kobe, and then we'll just kind of edit it together, and then or make the final edits, and then add the music, and we'll be done. And
Hmm.
they showed it to Kobe, and Kobe was like, "This is unacceptable," and made them start over from scratch essentially. And I was already
Catch
on,
that.
yeah,
Yes.
exactly, that Mamba mentality.
Yeah.
And I was already on the team, and so he just included me in the process of like building this film from the ground up. And so I saw them put it together, and saw him kind of guiding that process and learning about film along the way. And so I was learning a lot at the same time watching him. But he would often, one of the things he told me that still sticks with me in our first meeting was that he was like, watch this film and look at all these experiences in my life, but think about emotional moments in your own life that are parallel to these things for me, and write from that place, from your personal emotional place, and it's going to be great. And
Wait, that was his advice to you?
yeah, yeah,
Wow, like wow.
Yeah.
That's
And
incredible.
he was always like, pushing me to write the best music possible. And then I ended up working on, he wrote these audio or these children's books, and I scored the audiobooks for those, and
Mhm.
working on like his documentary about his final season. So I actually had a conversation with him like literally a week before he passed, because we were still working together on projects. But
Mhm.
he was constantly helping me think about how I could approach my craft in the best way possible and from different ways. And it also helps that like he is a huge John Williams fan, and actually used to call John Williams like a couple times a year, like a few times a year. They would just
Wow.
chat about process. So yeah.
Oh, just icon to icon.
I
Hello.
know, right? Yeah. It's like I wish I could be like just listening to those conversations. Yeah.
Wow, that is incredible.
Yeah.
So Kobe also had like this huge impact on children and like a service. I feel like maybe connected to his daughter and just wanting to. I feel like he would have mentored as he was mentoring you. In this program, we have these children from Kenya, and now you have a chance to give some advice and answer some questions and actually, like, I know there's a lot of dreamers that have, because I look at these questions and these are kids that know what they want and they just need to know how to get there.
Right.
And so I have so many questions. I don't want to be unfair. So I want to make sure that we get to the questions from the kids in Kenya.
Yeah.
Um, and so, the first question is, at what phase of the filmmaking process do you like to come to a project?
That's a great question. I feel like
Hmm.
for me, it's as early as possible, so that I can get a clear understanding of the story. It's also really the story and the characters. And it's really interesting to see how that continues to develop over time, because there are times where they start to hone in on specific themes, or as they're working on the edit of a film, I start to realize like, oh, some of these other pieces are falling away because they're not as important, or they're trying to figure out what the heart of the movie is as they're working on it. And so if I'm along the ride in that process, I can kind of see what the music should be really pointing to with that as well. Um, so I feel like the earlier the better, just because we can have a lot of conversations about what they're wanting the music to really underline and emphasize in the storytelling and in the experience with these characters. But
Hmm.
also I feel like it allows for that trial and error period, because if I come in too late, really we're just trying to you know get it right. And
Yeah.
if you don't have that much time, as to get it right, it's like you're oftentimes doing something that's somewhat expected, or doing something that comes easy, or trying to just get it done quickly. But it's hard to do things that are out of the box if you don't have that much time. And I love when I have a lot of time early on to try things and fail. And like directors that really encourage me to like really experiment. And if we don't, get it right with that experimentation, that's okay, because that experimentation might lead us down somewhere else, and all of that. So having time to have that sandbox period for me is really important. So earlier the better.
Yeah, I agree. And this question, I think this person probably already has a job in film because they want to know that directors might get too attached to temp music. I call it tempitis.
Yep. I like that. Yeah.
And so the temp music that they use during the edit, how do you introduce something new to them?
Yeah, I mean, again, this person already knows, knows
Right.
what it is.
Right.
For those of you that don't know, that temp music is the temporary music that's being put in as they're editing and trying to figure out what the sound of the movie is, and they take music from other films and put it in there. And for me, I feel like a lot of that's a conversation with the director to earn that trust, because really the temp has created this safety where they know that this music is hitting the emotion that they want to hit. And if I
Mhm.
can try and have conversations with them that can unlock what it is that they like about it, now there are some directors that it's difficult because they're maybe struggling with how to have that conversation. And so for them, it's like, I like the temp, whatever you got to do to make it feel like that. And
Mhm.
that becomes a more difficult job. And for me, when I'm put in that position, I maybe do that process myself, where I'm looking at what maybe is most effective about this temp. Is it the instrumentation? Is it the pace? Is it certain moments that it's hitting? Is it like, the key and like the frequency, or is it like, any of those kinds of things that might be worth borrowing from the temp to then build my own thing? But any director that's able to have a conversation about why is this temp making you feel that way. I worked a lot with Ava, and when we talk about temp, it's really amazing because she talks about the emotion behind it, where she'll say, this temp is making me feel this way in these moments. And so that way, I know that as long as I hit these moments in a similar way emotionally, it doesn't even have to be the same instrumentation or any of that, or borrowing too much from it. But if we can understand why it's hitting those beats and how it's making her feel, then I can kind of deduce what might be doing that, and try my own version of that.
That's very helpful. Because sometimes it's just like, oh yeah, well, I just want, here's Beyonce, and this is just what, for me as a songwriter, and I don't know why. And so having asking those questions makes it easier for me to say, well, what is it that you got from this? How does it make you feel? What is there a lyric? Is there, is the key? Is it the emotions, the way she's singing it? So that's, I totally agree.
I never thought of that there's temp with songs. I didn't even think about that.
And sometimes, especially because, of the kinds of songs that I write, there's usually like one song that they use all the time. And I'll tell you off camera because, but I'm like, oh, okay, here we go. And I'm like, I know this emotion. So I don't know. I guess it's a good thing.
Yeah. I know you can hit it.
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. So what's the most creative technique you've been able to bring to your film career and process?
That's a really good question. I feel like for me, it's my background as an improviser and as an accompanist, just because the thing I've always loved about being a jazz pianist is that you operate in these two spaces where sometimes you're the lead performer, especially if you have a trio or you're playing solo piano, but most often you're an accompanist where you're trying to figure out how to make these harmonies support the singer or support the horn player or whatever. And especially when those people are improvising, you're trying to figure out how to fill in the holes, or how to do something that's going to make what they're doing make sense, or contextualize what's happening. And so for me, I approach film scoring the same way, where I'll watch a scene over and over again without anything, and often try to figure out what the emotion is that we're trying to get at based on the conversation with the director and based on what I'm seeing. And then I go to the piano and improvise to try to find something that feels like it is getting me to a similar emotion. And then I just kind of play along to the screen as if I'm accompanying something. But it's nice to be able to move around and not have to think about and not have to write something out. Like I can sit behind a scene over and over again and just try a bunch of different things and try a bunch of different chord changes. And then I'm also thinking in that accompanist way, where there might be moments where I'm like, oh, I want to leave a hole for that line, or I want to emphasize that line, or I want to make a shift under that line. And I'm really treating it like the dialogue and the sound is another set of instruments that I'm playing behind. And that improvisation also was incredibly helpful in this crazy industry, as people changing their minds at the last minute, where there were times at a recording session where a director is like, you know what, I actually never really liked that moment. Can we try something else?
Right.
Like, yeah, that's easy. Like, yeah. Like being able to make those changes quickly and not have to worry too much, and just being able to trust my instincts on improvisation have been really, really valuable.
Agreed. So this I had this question as well. Someone asked, when did you realize that you'd like to apply your classical training to a film career? Because what I noticed is that over time, your scores have become a bit more classical. And so, I wanted to ask that question too.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I think that, it's something I've always dreamt about, because the film music I fell in love with, even at the same time as I was falling in love with all the jazz records I was falling in love with, like, Oscar Peterson or Wynton Kelly or Miles Davis, Herbie Hancock. Like, I was also listening mostly to John Williams or Howard Shore or James Newton Howard, or like these composers that like I definitely had also a huge love and soft spot for Terrence Blanchard and composers that were using jazz elements in their scores. But when I thought of film scoring, I thought of John Williams, or I thought of like these
Yeah.
movies that were like shaping my childhood. And so, I always dreamt of trying to get more into that type of space. And
Mhm.
as you were just kind of saying, it's really interesting to kind of navigate when you're known for something, when people come to you for that thing. And I remember my first couple of projects, I was just very fortunate to have directors that took a chance on me doing something else. Because I remember my first few meetings, I would go into a studio meeting, and those studio heads would be like, "Oh, we don't really have any like jazz stuff," or like, or they,
Oh, wow. Yeah.
yeah, or they'd like send me,
Yeah.
hip hop stuff just because that seemed like it probably made sense.
Yeah. Right.
And it was, that Kobe Bryant documentary is because my friend was like, "You're a dope musician, and I know that if I give you context and temp music, and like we talk about Cliff Martinez or Philip Glass or Steve Reich or like that kind of music, that you're going to be able to get that." Or
Yeah.
same with Justin Simeon, even though a lot of that has jazz in it, he was also like, "I want jazz, but I also want Ravel, or I want like, things that feel like Chopin, or like that kind of material." So I feel like a lot of that was really helpful in giving me the experience to write in that way. And same with Kobe, actually. Kobe,
Mhm.
for his audiobooks, uh, John Williams was always his template in his mind of what
Wow.
score should sound like. And so, the stuff I had to write for that was trying my best to write that Harry Potter type of style of writing, which
Right.
for me just meant like studying those scores and studying how to write in that style. So I
Mhm.
feel like by the time something like Bridgerton came along, which is like,
Mhm.
completely this classical sound, a
Right.
lot of it was like a combination of me always wanting to do that, also having filmmakers that gave me the space and trust to do that, just because like Bridgerton came along because I had done a Shondaland show a few years ago that
Mhm.
sounds nothing like that. And they just, again, trusted that as a good musician, I might be able to figure that sound out. And for
Absolutely.
me, it was all about studying that. By the time I got Bridgerton, I done so much studying that I felt like much more confident and comfortable in that kind of space. So I feel like it's like, I don't know, people, I've always heard my whole life like that. You've probably heard of that, like success is when preparation meets opportunity.
Inspiration. Yeah.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
so for me, I'm
Absolutely.
just like always like, how can I continue to prepare? Because who knows when that opportunity is going to come along.
Yeah. I mean, if you, I am positive that Shonda Rhimes could see, like, I feel like she's like this person that, because she's all knowing and all seeing, she can see, so she saw that in you, and knew that, and gave you that opportunity. And because oftentimes we go into meetings, like you said, and it's, oh, can you write this hip hop song? Or can you, I love that, when people take chances, and that's how we blossom. That's how we grow. That's
That-
how we get to, just stretch. I
exactly.
love that. I love that. So, what questions do you ask yourself that help you to decide the style of score you'll be creating?
Well, I guess if it's on a specific project, most of that's dictated by, conversations with the director. Like, oftentimes it's talking to him or her about like what they might envision in terms of like what this character listens to, or
Mhm.
what kind of music is happening in this environment. Or if there's any music, oftentimes directors I work with were listening to music when they were writing, if they were also the writer of the script. So I often ask like, what other stuff have you been listening to that's really helpful? um,
Mm,
I also really love creating these boundaries that I can then play in, where, for a movie like King Richard, I thought about the fact that it might be interesting to pull elements from this world sonically, thinking about like the sound of tennis and the sound of like the ball hitting the strings and things like that. And that
yeah.
led me to like prepared piano, or like all of these other things that
Mhm.
kind of maybe would create a nice texture that made sense for me with the film.
Yes. So when we're talking about like the kinds of films that, like the sound that you're developing, and is moving into classical, it is classical. So when you will you score other films like that will take you completely out of that? You know how John Williams has a sound. Are you creating that Kris Bowers sound?
I don't know. I think, I often look at like, with John Williams, I've studied his career a lot. And I think the thing that was really fascinating for him is when he was around my age, and like in his, I'd say like 20s to 30s, he was doing a lot of like studio work where he was just kind of writing
Mm.
the style of these different people. And, I think also at the time there was, you saw this old Hollywood style of like orchestral writing and things like that. But within that, he was like writing all these different versions of it and really trying to like write different types of music. So I feel like I'm kind of in that period of my life where I'm just open to whatever's going to challenge me. I think, again, something else that Kobe mentioned to me a lot was like, think before you say yes to something, think about how that's going to challenge you and make you a better composer by the end of it. And if you feel like that's going to do that, then take it. And so oftentimes, there are often projects that my team is like, why are you doing that? And I'm like,
Mhm.
I want to do it because it's going to give me a chance to exercise this muscle that I've never
That's amazing.
had. Like before scoring Space Jam, I wanted to score Raising Dion because I'd never done something that demanded like a bigger sound, or like an action sound. And so for
Yes.
me, it's just like what's going to make me better, and how can I take those things on to continue to grow. So maybe at some point I'll have like a sound that's identifiable, but I feel like right now it's just I'm still in student mode.
Developing. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. That's amazing that you feel that way.
yeah.
Because you are I hear it. I don't know how I missed that you did Raising Dion. I binge watched it yesterday.
Oh man, oh thank
Part
you.
of, I mean, 2 days, 2 seasons.
Wow, oh wow, that's amazing. Oh,
I had to check out and just like recenter, and I did it with Raising Dion. So
oh,
sidebar.
I
That's
appreciate it.
amazing. I love that kid. It's just like such a cool. I really love it. Um, my next question is, what's the one film score that gets stuck in your head?
I mean, like, there's definitely a lot. I mean,
Hmm.
they're cliche just because they are what they are. I feel like Jurassic Park and Star Wars are probably two that really stick in my mind, just because they're like, yeah, just
Yeah.
listened to them so much when I was a kid, and they were such a big part of my childhood. And I feel like for all of us, it's such a like, nostalgic feeling that you get
Yes.
immediately when you hear any of those like chords or harmonies. And also
Yes.
ET, anytime
E.T.
yeah,
Yes.
like the piano theme, the flying theme from ET is like, yeah,
Same.
something that sticks
Yeah.
with me. So yeah, John Williams is always my go-to.
Yes, mine too. I loved when I was a kid, I wanted to date two people when I grew up, and I was sure that I was going to date E.T. Scooby Doo. My mom was like, "Okay, girl, if that's what you do, E.T. and Scooby Doo, I'm gonna be with them when I grow up." So obviously, I watched a lot of movies and TV.
Yeah,
So my next question is, the director has a new idea that contradicts an earlier conversation that you had with them. How do you handle those tricky conversations without compromising your own vision for the score?
I think for me, the vision is whatever serves the story. So like,
Hmm.
there's so many times where I have, you take the time to come up with a really clear vision for something, and then I take it to the director, and they're like, no, that's not it. And then, for me, I feel like we are all trusting this director with the vision of what the story is, and the best directors are also trusting the story to be what it wants to be, and to kind of like, following that as its North Star. And so I feel like for me, whatever the director says is what it is. And so oftentimes a director changing their mind for me has always led me to uh, a much stronger representation in the music, in the score, where like, there are times where we're maybe scoring a certain character in a certain way, and we realize that we need to be a bit more complex, or not as one dimensional with how we're doing that. Or by the time we get too far along into the film, we realize that like the way we've been scoring this relationship or this character doesn't pay off in the way we want it to. So now we have to go back and try to figure that out. And also at the end of the day, like, we're all humans. Like, there's so many times where like I changed my mind about like life, or about so many different things, like it's always about us being open to that. And I feel like allowing for that human aspect of people feeling differently once they've had
Yes.
time to really sit with something only allows for like better art.
Yeah. And taking nothing personal. I feel like in life and film, like whenever I go into a project, I know that if someone says, I don't want that, or I want this temp song, like just like that, I just don't take it personally, and also being willing to do as many revisions as possible, just because I know it really gets better.
Yeah.
Every now and again, you may like, oh, I missed the original version, but I usually really like the process of going to doing it over until we get it right.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's
yeah.
great. Yeah.
So, how do you find the film's musical language? And what about the film's repeating motifs?
So I feel like the motifs usually come from, once I've had those conversations with the director about what's most important to them, um, we usually try to focus on those moments. And like for me, I'll always watch the film through until I find a moment that speaks to me on a
Mhm.
really visceral level. Where with Green Book, it was this moment where Mahershala's character Don Shirley was like standing outside watching these black field workers while he's being driven by this white man, and like you see this uh, solitude in his eyes and like this like tinge of sadness or pain, and that was the moment that felt like I feel like I can immediately write something that maybe can like get at that feeling. And then
Yeah.
that theme was, now his theme. And now I can look at any moment where we want to work with his theme and try to like, put that in those other places. Same with King Richard, it was like seeing this father being told no over and over again, and then just keeping a brave face for his kids and like continuing to push his kids in this positive, beautiful way. And with that, that was a moment that really spoke to me. And so once I had that theme, that was Richard's theme. So then I go through and figure
Yeah.
out where else can we use Richard's theme. And then sometimes when I look at the other themes, it's how does that theme then play with the theme that has already been established, or what are we trying to say with that character, and kind of do the same thing. Like, thinking about something like Space Jam, it was this relationship between LeBron and his son, but also uh, Al G, the Don Cheadle character, was like all about ego and like
Right.
toxic masculinity essentially, or like all these things. And so I feel like both of those worlds are worlds that I could easily kind of put my head, get into that headspace and write something from that place. And then once I have those themes that are really strong, it's just continuing to follow the story with those characters or those motifs. Because there are even times where, that character might not be present, but whatever we're talking about in that scene might have to do with that character. And so, using that theme there. And by the time I do that, it often feels like a lot of the movie has kind of been scored at that point, and then it's about, kind of filling in the holes.
Yeah, okay. So you just hit us with like three movies that I know I love, so and I'm sure everyone watching does too. I have a two-part question, I think. What musical story do you want to tell? Like I know with like Don Shirley, like is there someone else that you, or can you even like share that? Like what it could even be like the story of how a city feels to you. It doesn't have to be a certain, you know what I mean? Do you have a musical story that you haven't told that you personally want to tell?
Yeah, I don't. There are definitely a lot of musicians that I really would love to. I'm just curious about their lives and how to tell that story. Like thinking about Duke Ellington or Billy
Yeah.
Strayhorn or
Yeah.
Thelonious Monk or Louis Armstrong. I feel like Louis Armstrong is really fascinating to me because I mean him and Duke Ellington, but there were these icons and these like pop icons and celebrities at a time where they were also experiencing what it was like to be a black man in this
Right.
country in a way
Mhm.
that I just don't know how Louis Armstrong was able to be as like warm and uplifting and such a beautiful spirit and energy
Right.
uh for the rest of the world when he was dealing with that personally. So I feel like those stories maybe are, as far as musicians, immediately come to mind.
Yeah, I see that for you. Um, the other, it's a fun question, but I don't know if you can really answer it.
I
Do you
like it.
have a favorite? Do you have a favorite film that you've worked on? Or, I mean, you've worked on TV and film, but film. Do you have a favorite score?
Not really. It's really, like you said, it's really tough to answer that. I
Yeah,
think that generally it's usually whatever is like the last thing I worked on kind of feels like the thing
right,
I feel, most connected to and most proud of, especially because it always
right.
represents some sort of like maturation or something. So I do think King Richard in that way is probably right
Love.
now one that really like sticks with me. But there's always an element of each one that I feel like proud of, and I'm sure the next one's going to be, my
Yeah.
favorite. Yeah,
And
after that.
that, I'll tell you, I went to see that movie three times
Oh
and
wow. Oh nice.
cried every time, like,
Yeah.
No one was watching, and they were, because like, oh, because it just pulls on you in so many different ways, just beautifully executed, just beautifully written, beautiful, all the acting, everything was amazing,
Yeah.
script, everything. So the other question is, the last question from this series, and we have like a couple more. How is composing for film similar or different from composing for other mediums like classical or jazz performances?
It's interesting. I feel like
Question.
one is, the fact that with film you are always a part of something else. And so, you know,
Mm,
oftentimes there are times where I might want to do something because as a musician, I really want to like, you know, kind of exercise an idea or like build something out and kind of like make something feel really big or whatever it might be or busy. And that's not going to be the best thing to serve the action or the story or the moment. And so even though I love being an accompanist, as a film composer, you're always that. And I think in the concert space, there's nothing that you're accompanying in that way in terms of like, being able to write whatever. And oftentimes that can be a bit more difficult for me, where like thinking about a couple of classical pieces I've written in the last few years. I've written a couple of concertos, and like those are so difficult for me because now every second is something can be something else. And like oftentimes it's really helpful to have something that you're accompanying, because then you're just focusing on supporting something instead of trying to like constantly think of how to fill the space. But I think the similarity for me is also always based in storytelling and emotion, where like even as a jazz pianist, if I was improvising, it was my turn to improvise. For me, I always had to feel like what is my mood right now? What's the mood of the space? Like where do I want to improvise from emotionally? And that just became a North Star. And anytime I didn't have that, I just felt like I was just like playing, not connected to my heart. It was like mostly just like, muscle memory or playing from
mm,
my brain. And I feel like even when I'm writing something for that space, it's the same thing where I need to have some sort of story or idea or emotion that I'm trying to capture, because then I feel like I have a North Star that I can go after, instead of just like writing something to be like musically impressive or like an exercise essentially.
yeah, got it. So, what is your favorite musical composition and what makes it so good?
That's a really tough question. I think the answer I always come to is Lush Life by Billy Strayhorn, which is
Mm.
this really heart-wrenching, beautiful song. My favorite recording of it is Johnny Hartman and John Coltrane. Um,
Mm.
and it's this like sad song about a guy who lives a lush life, like lives a life at drinking at dive bars and all of that.
Mm.
And I fell in love with the song, and then afterward learned that Billy Strayhorn was 17 when he wrote it, and learning about like the pain that he experienced as like a gay man at that time, a gay black man at that time.
Wow.
There's such a heaviness to that song, and it's still beautiful, and it's like a through composed thing that has a journey to it. So I feel like Lush Life is always a song that I come back to.
Hmm. I'm gonna have to check that out.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm like, why don't I know that? Okay, so what mood is the hardest to compose music for and why?
I think the toughest mood for me is like comedy or like levity. So
Mm.
I
Yeah.
find that it's easy to be on the nose in a way where it's not very interesting, or it feels like very expected. And how to make something feel funny but feel unique to why whatever that is funny, I feel like is something that I always find difficult, because it's easy to just kind of go through, pull out the pizzicato strings and whatever else might
Right,
make it
right.
like this is
Yeah.
the funny sounding music. But to do it in a way that makes it feel unique to that, I think is always something that's a bit more of a challenge and isn't as immediate to me or for me as a lot of other emotions.
Yeah, I agree. I did have fun with Just Look Up. That was a,
That's
it
all.
was, I think it's the world. The world was falling apart, and I'm like, oh, okay. This there was the inspiration wasn't too far. Just
Yeah,
turn the TV on, read the newspaper.
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
so what would you consider the most challenging aspect of composing music?
I think for me, it's myself, like getting out of my own way. And like the fact that, the whole time I'm writing music, I'm thinking about how bad it is or why I shouldn't be doing what I'm doing or why I'm making a mistake. Or, I think the stress of the process for me most of the time comes from the internal dialogue I'm having with myself, or my fears of, you're writing this music for somebody else to say is good. So then it's tough to like think about whether or not what you're doing is going to please this other person. You can't really control that. And that's why it's always great to have directors that create a safe environment where you can feel not so concerned about that. But I do find that part of the process does create this cycle for me with internal dialogue that can be a little tough sometimes. So I feel like that's probably the hardest part, is just like getting out of my own way.
Yeah. Yeah. Move, Kris. Get out. Let's just sing that little song.
Yeah, I'll start doing that. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Describe a time when a musician or director disagreed with you and what happened. They want to know what happened.
Yeah, what happened? Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, like it happens most of the time. I think that, like, and not most of the time. Actually, that's not true. I think it happens quite frequently, and I feel like there might be maybe one time on every project, where that might happen, where I feel like I should go in a certain direction and the director doesn't feel that way. But most of the time, when I take their advice, that ended up being the right way to go. One very specific example that I always find really interesting is one of the very first score that I wrote was for it was a documentary for this woman Elaine Stritch, who the Broadway actress, and she, at the time, she's passed now, but at the time she was still alive, and she was dealing with diabetes and like had health issues very frequently, and she was in and out of the hospital. And there was a scene in the documentary where the doctor was telling her she had a really bad health scare, and the doctor was telling her how important it was for her to take care of herself because of how close she was to death, essentially. And I wrote this piece of music that felt like emotional, and felt like it was like carried that level of
Cautionary.
caution. Yeah. And the director was like, this feels too sad. This feels like she did die. Like, this feels like it's gone too far in that direction. And I wasn't really sure how to take that. And so I tried a couple other things, and then it felt like we went too far in the other direction, where now I didn't feel like, tense enough, or didn't feel like, had enough caution. And the solution actually ended up being changing the main instrument from piano to a different instrument, because it was the sound of piano that made this moment feel a bit too sensitive or too emotional. And so I feel like that was a moment I feel really thankful to have had so early in my career, because that immediately made me feel like, oh, this instrument feels a certain way, especially for this director. And so now I know that, like, if somebody says something's too sad, it might not be the piece of music, it might just be this instrument.
Yeah, that's a good note. Can you explain how you might compose a new piece of work?
Yeah, I think
So do you usually sit down to the piano, or I know, I mean, you're a pianist, but sometimes you pick up the guitar or
no, I definitely don't pick up any other instruments. I wish I could play another instrument. Like, me playing guitar is a very sad sight. I feel like it's like piano and other various keyboards. But other than that process I was mentioning earlier about improvising and singing, and trying to improvise around feeling, oftentimes it's stepping away from an instrument completely and just trying to think about what that feels like, and like, honestly, kind of like singing to myself, or like thinking about sounds in my own head, where I feel like, okay, if I felt this way, like, what does that sound like? And oftentimes I also start thinking about what other pieces of music make me feel that way. Like, it's so interesting for me to look at. There are a couple of pieces I know that directly influenced John Williams, for example, with like the sound of this Shostakovich piece, or like the sound of this other classical piece, and the emotion that it carried, and then how he was able to totally do his own thing with that. And so for me, I feel like I've always looked at that as a piece of reference, where if I'm writing something that's supposed to feel angry, for example, then oftentimes if I'm stuck on where to start, I'll also think about, like, what other music do I feel makes me feel angry, or like when I'm angry, I want to listen to because it makes me feel like I can tap into that emotion or whatever that is. And then I go listen to that music and see if there's something about that, whether it's the tempo or something with the harmonies or the melody or
Right.
something about that is getting at that feeling in a very acute way. And then I maybe try to borrow that element of it and then build on that. So sometimes, like I love this that video. It's on YouTube and Vimeo. Like everything's a remix, just because it's like talks about how every new idea is not a new idea. That's all built
Right.
on something else. And so not being afraid of looking elsewhere for inspiration, because the thinking that you have to reinvent the wheel every time is where you get
Right.
really stuck.
Yeah. I have to look at that too. Everything's a remix. I'm not familiar.
It's dope. They literally like do like A/B images of like, you know, um, Star Wars and like Akira Kurosawa films, or like Star Wars and like, old fighter jet films, or like,
Wow.
Tarantino and other and westerns. Like it just kind of shows how much people literally take frames from other movies as far as the way they like shoot something or the way
Oh
they
yeah.
costume and all that. Yeah. So
Very cool. Okay, last question. Your composition is poorly received and has to be revised. What do you do?
well, I feel like that was like traumatic. I was like, wait, which composition was poorly received? I was like, wow, like,
Hilarious.
yeah. I feel like for me, I always try to get to immediately to the solution, like the answer, like why was it feeling that way? Because like there's always like I don't really sit too long in the disappointment of that. Like I think that honestly my trouble with like sitting in some sort of like doubtful place happens before I even share a piece of music. But like once I
Right.
share something and somebody tells me that this didn't work, often I'm like how why didn't that work, so I can
Yeah.
figure out like what to do differently, and asking those questions, because oftentimes it's like, is it something about the emotion that I'm missing? Is it something about the pace of it? Is it something about the instrumentation? Is it like, oftentimes I'll ask the director, if I'm really far off, if there's another piece of music that does get to that feeling for them or that they can think of. And it's been really interesting sometimes where I'll ask the director that, and they'll give me a reference that I'll listen to, and I'm like, this doesn't sound anything like what we're working on.
Yeah.
And or even sometimes like there's sometimes where the director is like, I think of the sound of this other piece, and because it has this instrumentation, and I listen to that piece and it doesn't have that instrumentation at all.
Right.
But
Yeah.
oftentimes, like I'm like, okay, well, there's something about this that made you feel a certain way, and so let me look at that. And is there anything about this that I can borrow or figure out? And so usually it's just asking questions, like asking so many questions, so I can use this mistake, or use this mistake for
Awesome.
lack of a better, yeah, exactly, lesson, so I
Yeah.
can try to figure out how to do something different and move in the right direction.
Yeah, absolutely. So, any final advice for students getting into film composing?
Yeah, a few things. I think one, always be a student and be obsessed about craft and getting better and learning, and that's all aspects of this job, because it's fascinating how much of this job as a film composer can be in the technical aspect of knowing how to use certain pieces of software, or knowing how to actually record the music that you're going to need to record, or make that music in terms of like the technical part of that, but also knowing how to express yourself with technical ability, I think is incredibly important, because technique only allows you to then express yourself in a more fluid way. And then the second thing to that is to really tap into what it is that you love, because that's what makes you unique. Like it's so interesting to me how much I'll never forget like some of the albums that I found, or feel like I found and discovered, that changed my life. And then
Mm,
I talk to somebody else about it and they're like, oh yeah. And I'm like, wait, how are you not like,
exactly.
like,
Yeah.
and that kind of taught me that like the fact that that speaks to me so deeply, so personally, means that there's something in there for me to continue to
Yeah.
discover, like figure out why that's like a part of me that I'm hearing in that piece, essentially. And so whenever you recognize those moments, really hold on to those things and then go deeper into those things. Yeah, I feel like those two pieces of advice feel like things that I always think about myself even.
Yeah, great advice. I just wanted to talk about a moment about education being key because I know that not everybody has access, and like when I was growing up, I just didn't want just for transparency. My mom was a single mother, and my her best what she wanted to do for me was to make sure I survived East
Mhm.
Oakland, California, and so now looking back. I have all this information, and whenever I have an opportunity or an audience, I like to talk directly about education and how we have the ticket to that freedom, whatever we want, when we have when we can go, we do well at school. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, 100%. I feel like it's really interesting how much the way that our systems have been built, especially like educational systems, have been built to make us feel like, you know, if you're not excelling, that you're dumb, or like you're not good at these things, or in a way where it can be very easy to like just give up because you kind of accept this prescription that like the system is kind of giving you, even though a lot of these systems have been built to allow that failure. um,
Hmm.
and I feel like, really it's all about uh, being curious, continuing to like move at your own pace and like learn things at however you want to learn them.
Yeah,
um, and and like you said, knowing that the more you do that, the more you're going to unlock aspects of your future.
absolutely.
Because like, it's pretty fascinating to see how much the world can change for you the more that you feel educated in whatever space you might want to be focused in, or any of that. And yeah, I feel like knowing that like anything that you're maybe feeling is difficult, and that you're failing in, like, that you're not a failure. Like it's
Yeah,
just that's something
the
that's
lesson. Yeah,
yeah, exactly. It's something to continue to chip away at and find the people and the environment that's going to help support that. I think it's
yeah,
always disappointing in spaces where like the environment that you're in is reinforcing these ideas that you might not achieve something, and that's just not true. Like whenever I look at any great person that I've either had the fortune to be around or have studied, there's a book actually that I read recently about greatness, where it's like it's a myth that people are born great or born with these crazy talents or born with these abilities, that like every person just spent much more time than anybody else doing that thing. Like
absolutely.
if you just spend time in any space that you want to be great at, then you're going to be great, and just
Yep,
keep
I
that in mind.
totally agree. Knowledge is power.
Yeah,
It
100%.
truly is. It's our way up, our way out, our way through.
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally agree.
Well, Chris,
All
this
right.
was amazing. I could have done this a couple of more hours, just amazing talking to you, and I hope to talk to you more.
Yeah,
And
definitely. Hope to
thank
work
you
with you
so
more
much.
too. Yeah, for sure.
Thank you, Chris, for that wonderful conversation. And thank you for participating in the Academy's Visiting Artist Film Series, FilmAid Edition for film composers.